Hey everyone, today is day 9 of the Brave Warrior Challenge. Today I want to talk to you all about the prioritization and who's on your ship. So, what do I mean by that? Sometimes we lose track of who is important in our life and who's supposed to be on board in the ship in our lives and who's supposed to be sailing with us and who's supposed to be kicked out of our ship and who else is just supposed to be seeing us sail by, right? There's different categories. So sometimes we lose track in the midst of life, and we lose track of who we are dedicating time to, who's our priority, who we should be putting boundaries on in our life, and who doesn't belong in our ship. Because if you don't make priority for those that are on board with you, that have chosen to be with you, and that have been there always for you, you lose sight of what's important. And you need to take control of that ship and sail it, right? You gotta sail that ship. And it's not to say that God is in control. Yes, God is in control of everything, of the ship, yourself, how's it sailing, everything. But you have certain control over that in terms of your actions. And what do I mean by that? If we go back to the story of Noah's Ark, God told him to be obedient and to build that ship. And he had specific requirements of who was supposed to be on board in that ship. He gave him the dimensions for the ship. He told them, I want 2 sets of each female and male of these animals. And I need only these people on board with you. So he gave specific instructions, and we are called to be obedient to him. So if God is calling us to be on board with those that he has aligned us with, that he has put in our life, then we should be obedient to that. And we must have priority over that and have our boundaries set up in place. Because if you don't, imagine this. Imagine if Noah had not been obedient and he had let in other people that were crying out to get inside the boat or the ship, right? It would be the ship. Boat is a little bit smaller. But let's say if he had not been obedient, what would happen? That would have been destruction. Imagine placing people that God did not want on board inside the ship with Noah. And they would be creating chaos, confusion, destruction. Who knows? We don't know. But then, Noah was very strict. When God said to, shut that door of the ship and sail away, he did just that. He only put in place those individuals, and I'm talking about animals and people, that God had indicated for him to place in there. So today I call you to think about who is really in your ship. Who's contributing to you positively in your life, in your ship. Who's actually taking away from the good things of you. Who is leading you, who's leading you in a negative way. Who's pulling you out of your priorities. Who's pulling you out of the important things that God has assigned for you. So think about that. And it's not to say that, we all go through things, and we all are human. And sometimes we might have our season where we might not be, how can I put this together? We might have friendships, or we might have people that all of a sudden turn our backs on us, and unfortunately that could be just a season. But you have to learn to recognize who's in your life for a season and who's in there for a reason and only temporary. So for those that are long term, that are supposed to be with you for, forever, basically, until death to us part, right? Until, until you pass away. Who are those people in your life that are always there for you? No matter what, no matter the good, the bad, the ugly, who's there when you most need them? And those are the people that you want on your ship, right? And so make priority for those things that belong in your ship. And I'm not just talking about people, I'm talking about also putting your boundaries and setting aside time for things that are important for you, for your development, for your growth, for your well-being, right? Because sometimes we might hang around or be with things that are not particularly good for us, right? So being cognizant of that is important. So if you were to make a list of everyone and everything that belongs inside your ship, what would that look like? How would you design that ship? Right? And ask God, like, God, is this aligned with whom and what I should have inside my ship, sailing along with me? And do I need to close the door on any other things that are not helping me or serving me well, or even people that are not serving me well either? God gives clarity to those that seek Him and ask for guidance. So that's my message for today. I hope this resonates with you or helps you in some way, because it did for me when I read that story of Noah's Ark in more specificity. When I read the story in the Bible, not what I saw on TV or not what I heard from anybody else, but when I started reading the Bible and knowing the specifics of that, I started analyzing things, and I started really, getting discernment and really finding out what that meant. And so I want to share with you today that same message. So what I would encourage you, like I mentioned before, is, put together a list, think through, who's supposed to be in my ship and what things are supposed to belong in my ship. And if you do that, then you'll start realizing, oh, I need to spend less time on this other activity that's really not helping me, that's distracting me, right? And perhaps you could also, even though it's hard, sometimes there could be individuals in your life that are not serving you well, that are pulling you away, and don't have your best interest in mind. Perhaps it could be someone that you're associated with that every time you hang around with this person, you end up getting drunk. That's just an example, right? Of course, I'm not talking about anyone specifically. These are all, examples that I'm sharing. But let's say another example, every time that you hang around with this other person, he pulls you away from spending time with your family, right? So we got to think about those things because it's so important. But that's what I wanted to share. Take care, everyone, and I will be on tomorrow. Bye.